Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. This is Ukraine War news update for the 20th of January 2024. This is the second part thereof. Please check out the first part on the channel already. Right, we're going to go to military aid and equipment for Ukraine and Russia and whatnot. That first segment I normally start with. So, President Joe Biden's top aides have told lawmakers in a private meeting that if Congress fails to authorize additional military aid for Ukraine in the coming days, Russia could win the war in a matter of weeks, months at best. So, okay, we're going to be concentrating a little bit on what's going on in the US at the moment due to some of the claims coming out with regard to the effect that a lack of military aid is having on the front line. I was talking in the first video about how, we know that artillery units are having to, withdraw from certain areas because they don't have the ammunition. We're hearing that units on the ground are having to concede territory or cede territory to the Russians as a result of not having ammunition, so on and so forth. So there is a particularly difficult period at the moment. We can talk about what's going on in terms of long-term strategies for aid to Ukraine, but that doesn't help the here and now. And so there are these two areas to look at. And what the US has traditionally been very good at is helping Ukraine with a whole bunch of just general equipment that they need, like ammunition and artillery shells that they need right now, keeping that flow going. And that has kind of been, that tap has been turned off. And, the US has huge stockpiles that Ukraine has been happily receiving. With regard to the DPICM, the DPICMs, the cluster munitions, those shells, like Ukraine were desperate for shells. US suddenly said, right, we are going to give cluster munitions, and then that made available, a stockpile of millions of rounds of artillery, cluster munition artillery. And so that then going to Ukraine meant that, we've got the short-term supply of these desperately needed supplies, while at the same time the US and Europe and etc., other nations are putting in place these production schedules and facilities to allow Ukraine to get long-term supplies. So there are two things going on there. Anyway, here we have some pretty scary stuff being reported. So Rob Lee here saying the majority or all of certain critical types of munitions for Ukraine comes from the US. Europe can't replace these in the short term. And so here's the issue. And that's a problem. So Europe is trying to pick up the slack of this impasse in Congress, but that's a long-term thing. Okay, right, they're not getting artillery ammunition from the US. We need to build more. Okay, that'll take place in over the next year, right? But no, they need stuff now. And Europe can't replace these in the short term, says Rob Lee. Without another aid package, Ukraine will struggle to defend its territory and infrastructure. And he's reacting to indeed that this article, that it's incredibly stark. Biden gives lawmakers a grim assessment of Ukraine without more aid. So we know that there was this meeting so where was it? There was this meeting of lawmakers in the White House where the administration expressed to the American lawmakers how serious the situation is. And I was saying over the last couple of days that I hope that they were giving a little bit of sensitive intelligence as well to suggest, how serious, a bit of scaring them, but scaring them with reality, not kind of trying to sell them a narrative, but saying, look, things are bad, and they're bad because we aren't helping in a way that we need to be helping. So here's NBC News reporting, incredibly stark, Biden aides give lawmakers a grim assessment of Ukraine without more aid. So Joe Biden's top aides bluntly told lawmakers in a private meeting on Wednesday that if Congress fails to authorize additional military aid for Ukraine in the coming days, Russia could win a war in a matter of weeks, months at best, according to two people familiar with the meeting. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines told the lawmakers that Ukraine will run out of certain air defense and artillery capabilities in the coming weeks. They're just going to run out the ability to defend themselves, according to people familiar with the meeting. The grim assessment, which one White House official described as incredibly stark, was delivered as the future of Ukraine aid has never been more uncertain. It also comes as White House officials are increasingly alarmed at the prospect of Biden failing to follow through with his promise that the US will be there for Kyiv as long as it takes. In Wednesday's meeting at the White House, Sullivan and Haynes gave the top congressional leaders a classified time frame for when Ukraine's key military resources will be significantly depleted. So this is what I was talking about, that classified information that they wouldn't otherwise be privy to. Come into the White House, we're going to show you this. This is what it is really like. This is how bloody important it is. So yeah, classified time frame for when Ukraine's key military resources will be significantly depleted, and detailed assessment of the current dynamics on the battlefield. Two people familiar with the meeting said. Sullivan emphasized that Ukraine's position would grow more difficult over the course of the year, a White House official said, by offering specific date ranges of when Ukraine will be run low on various capabilities in the short term. The president's aides told the lawmakers that a lack of aid would affect far more than Ukraine and could prompt other countries that rely on the US, including Japan and South Korea, to rethink their alliances, according to people familiar with the meeting. Their message, these people said, was that a Russian victory simply because the US couldn't come through will reverberate around the world. So the bipartisan group of congressional leaders at the meeting agreed that providing aid to Ukraine is a national security priority, but acknowledged that there are disagreements about how to proceed legislatively, these people said. So of course it's all still linked to the border, right? Now, CNN has done a report saying US aid slump is unlikely to have a major short-term impact. US intelligence does not believe that a decrease in US aid for Ukraine will have a major impact on the battlefield in the short term, but will become a problem later once Russia regroups, CNN reported on January the 19th, citing anonymous sources. So that's slightly twisting it, saying, okay, well, I've just been saying that there are short-term effects here. They're saying, no, broadly speaking, you might get the odd issue here and some retreating there and ceding some territory there, but broadly speaking, they'll be able to keep things somewhat in line, but the issue is going to be further down the line. So if that aid then doesn't come, and we have maybe a change of presidency, then actually things are really not looking good. I would actually just go and just say both are an issue. The short term is an issue, like it is, you know. What we want for Ukraine is the best possible outcome at any point in time. The best possible outcome right now is to get everything now and in a continued way. I mean, we're trying to like sell things like, oh, it won't be too bad if they don't have stuff now, but it will be worse later on. Yeah, but it won't be too bad is not good enough. Like, they need these. There are people dying here, and there is a future of democracy on the line, certainly regionally speaking. And so they'll be all right in the short term is not good enough. It's like they need to do as well as they can right now, and they need to do as well as they can going forward. Right, USA plans to transfer as much aid to possible until January 2025, according to CNN. Quote, and we'll go through this in a second, in addition to the fact that aid is desperately needed, many of those I spoke with are thinking about providing as much as possible by January 2025. So this is going back to the idea of the whole point of that $61 billion package as being part of all this other stuff is to give it now, get it sanctioned now, if you like, so that you don't have to keep taking it through Congress. Give as much as you can. Get it as much of it committed now. And here's this idea, continuing with the idea that as much as possible needs to be given, I guess, before the election. And then before January, which is when the new president would really come in. So in November, you have the election, and then January 2025 will be when a new president properly takes up office. Now, let's look at this CNN article, and it is important. So grim realization sets in over state of Ukraine war as funding fight continues in Washington. Biden met with the House and Senate lawmakers at the White House on Wednesday, as we've just found out. They laid out specific capabilities that Ukraine will run out of in the coming months, according to White House official familiar with the meeting, who declined to give any more detail. Another official told CNN they specifically pointed to air defense systems and artillery ammunition as examples of key capabilities that could be depleted without US support. Biden also warned that US personnel were on the line, saying that if the Ukraine-Russia war spills over into NATO territory, the US would have to get directly involved in the conflict. But House Speaker Mike Johnson, who along with other House Republicans has tied additional Ukraine funding to a broader immigration deal, said afterward that continuing to fund Ukraine risked turning it into a quagmire for the US akin to its 2-decade war in Afghanistan. No. The problem is if you don't do that, it's going to become some long, protracted issue. This is way more serious than Afghanistan. It's just way more serious. Afghanistan was like a spillover from this idea that you had this war on terror and it was going to finish out and blah, blah, blah. And it just all went a bit wrong. This is a completely different kettle of fish. And I would argue is just insanely more serious. Quote, we cannot spend billions of dollars without a clear strategy articulated. And I told the president in the meeting today again, as I've been saying repeatedly, sir, you have to articulate what the strategy is. What is the end game? Johnson said Wednesday night in an interview with CNN's Caitlin Collins. Now, the problem here is, as Anders Puck-Nielsen pointed out, is you can't have a strategy without knowing what equipment you've got. You're putting a cart before the horse here. You need to have an understanding of what resources you have so you can set a goal. You can't set a goal, otherwise it's just pie in the sky. Yeah, we're going to have this. Okay, then he's saying, how are you going to have that? Well, we don't know how we're going to have that. Ends, ways, means. We don't know the ways and the means if you aren't telling us what we are going to have in terms of military equipment. So this is a completely unrealistic expectation for Mike Johnson here. And go and check out Anders Puck-Nielsen's video that very clearly sets out that this is an invalid move from Mike Johnson. It really is. So at the White House again on Thursday, Biden told reporters that he thought the meeting went well and he believed, quote, the vast majority of members of Congress support aid to Ukraine. The question is whether or not a small minority are going to hold it up, which would be a disaster, Biden said. And this section is super important. Race to approve funding before the election. Meanwhile, inside the White House, NATO headquarters and in Kyiv, there is a keen awareness that if Donald Trump is re-elected in November, he will likely slash support for Kyiv. Quote, the number one reason Republicans will not come out in favor of a supplemental Ukraine is that they don't want to offend candidate Trump and his supporters, Democratic Republican Representative Mike Quigley said on CNN Max on Wednesday. Quote, he's already made it clear that what he would do. The war would be over on his first day. We're going to return to this because Zelensky has publicly come out and spoken about this on Channel 4 in the UK, or with the UK's Channel 4 News. So the war would be over on the first day, which means Putin gets to keep the borders he has, if not more. And that's something that Trump has pretty much publicly admitted, right? So this is not liberal media trying to, hang Trump out to dry there. This is Trump's own rhetoric and own claims. Now, we also understand that Mike Johnson has been in very close contact with Trump with regard to Ukraine. So Trump's messaging is Johnson's messaging, really. And he is just, looking to Trump as being kind of the controller of the GOP, possibly as far as Mike Johnson is concerned, as to what he needs to do. So no matter what happens in American politics this year, US and Western intelligence officials believe that Russia's war in Ukraine is likely to go on for much longer. Assessments vary, but virtually all of them assume that there will be at least 2 more years of fighting, according to multiple sources familiar with the intelligence, long enough to outlast Biden's first term. Privately, some US and Western officials say there could be as many as 5 more years of fighting. Goodness me. Administration officials and lawmakers, including some hawkish Republicans, have for that reason been eager to approve and channel the funding to Ukraine before the clock potentially runs out at the end of 2024. Quote, aside from there being a desperate need, getting as much aid in before January 2025 is on the minds of a lot of folks I've spoken to, said one US official. Not only is it important that the monies get appropriated, but they get dispersed before the election, as any financial year 24 funds still waiting to be spent can get blocked by Trump. Congressional aide familiar with the discussion said that the more hawkish lawmakers like Republican Senator Lindsey Graham and Republican Representative Michael McCall were among those pushing last autumn for Congress to approve enough funding to hold Ukrainian military forces over through the 2024 election. The administration ultimately requested $60 billion, but Congress could not reach a deal before the end of last year. Doing anything more in a fraught election year may now be little more than a pipe dream, the aide said. Goodness me, that's depressing. We are out of money, said a US military official stationed in Europe. The administration was able to do some magic, but we're getting down to the last of it, said one source familiar with Western intelligence. Quote, basically, everything depends on Biden getting re-elected, doesn't it? So that's what Western intelligence think. I know that that kind of a quote will annoy many of my viewers, but that's the reality of what people think kind of outside of the US. And I can't see it any other way, really, unless the Department of Defense and intelligence services, if Trump gets in, and I don't think that's a foregone conclusion by any stretch of the imagination. But if he was to get in, I would hope that they could convince him with the reality of what his positioning is and what the ramifications would be. Now, moving on, in 2024, EU countries will produce 1.3 to 1.4 million shells, most of which will be sent to Ukraine as military aid, reports European Commissioner for the Internal Market Thierry Breton. This is really good news. I get a little bit frustrated that people slag off the EU because they might not reach the 1 million shells in a year by the end of March. I mean, I think they're at least having 600,000. It's going to be somewhere between, I would have thought, 600,000 and a million. But if they don't reach that, look, they've made that pledge and they tried really hard to do it. Like, they could not have put a number on it and just said, we're going to keep increasing, and then no one be criticizing them. They might be saying, yeah, it's not enough. But because they put an actual number on that, that's a problem with putting definite pledges like that in place that are based on a lot of variables and predictions, is you are potentially setting yourself up for the fall. But the fact that they did that and they wanted to achieve that, I think should be celebrated. And the fact that within this next year, they're going to be up to 1.3 to 1.4 million shells in a year is really good. So let's look at the positives rather than criticizing the negatives. Would be my approach. They just need as much as they can and as soon as possible. Right, the Netherlands handed over a mobile field hospital to Ukrainian border guards. The State Border Service... Actually, I didn't want this one in here. This was supposed to be later, but never mind. State Border Guard Service of Ukraine reports it's noted that the main feature of the hospital is the equipment for working at low temperatures. So just have a look at this.
You can fix it like a tire of your bike.
Це останній з польових госпіталів, які передбачені.
Unfortunately, they're translating that into Ukrainian, I believe. But this is all really good news. Ukraine need as many of these sorts of bits of kit as possible. Easy to erect. I mean, it's camping these days. You have inflatable tent structures, so that's fantastic, and obviously well able to be used in very low temperatures, as some of the design features indicate. So good news. Good to see them on the front line or near the front line. So now this is where I wanted to go. Germany. Joachim Knopf, Geschäftsführer Taurus Systems GmbH. Sowohl die Taurus... No, oh, right. Okay, let's go for Translate Post. I've got that. Only joking. Right, so Joachim Knopf, Managing Director of Taurus Systems GmbH, says, we can push forward both Taurus new production, platform integration, and the overhaul of inventory at short notice. The prerequisites is that the customer has commissioned it. Right, this is massively important. So we've got basically the head of MBDA Germany, essentially, saying, or you know, Taurus Systems GmbH here, saying, we can do this quickly. We can overhaul the infantry we've already got. We can build new ones. All we need is an order from the government. So what has happened here? Well, Germany has essentially come out with this, some more rhetoric to do with why they can't provide Taurus. So the SPD around Olaf Scholz have been caught within another embarrassing situation regarding Taurus missiles, says Tendar, who's a German source. Defense politician Johannes Arit of the SPD claimed that Germany cannot deliver the missile because it would leave Germany vulnerable and that new missiles cannot be produced for the foreseeable period of time. However, the manufacturer MBDA Deutschland already mentioned back in November that it can ramp up production and reiterated this stance yesterday, so that's what you just heard once again, exposing the hollow statement by this part of the German government. So there are elements of the German government that are saying no to Taurus, and there are also large swathes of the German government who are saying yes to Taurus. And the excuses for no to Taurus, at least at the moment, seem to be not decent rationale. It just, I have an issue there. So now we're going on to France. France can also afford it. So what was he talking about? So these are the Caesars, 78 Caesars being offered, or France have announced that they're going to build 78 Caesars, and that I believe 6 of them have already been bought or will be paid for by Ukraine, and then the rest of them are going to be, I think, possibly EU funding or a number of different nations, or I'm not sure. Anyway, John Rich says France can also afford it. I hate extrapolating costs like this, but 50 million euros for 12 Caesars translates to 300 million euros for 72. So 300 million euros, he's saying, for France. He says that is trivial. The value of the French aid thus far is around 3.2 billion euros, as according to that article that came out recently. That's not what they've admitted publicly, but that's the estimation for what they've actually given. It's half of what the UK has or will provide, and an even smaller fraction of what Germany has provided. So adding 300 million onto that is small fry for France, really. So the argument here is, who's going to pay for the other 72? France can afford it. France can afford it and should. I believe the implication is should afford it. So 54 Caesars are operational in Ukraine at the moment. This is French aid to Ukraine. And Ukrainians are implementing innovation on them. Ukraine wants more SAMP-T, Crotale, Mistral, and electronic warfare systems. France must increase the training of fighter pilots in a tactical field. The performance of AMX-RC is excellent. That's interesting, that the idea that... AMX-RCs are these wheeled tanks, the light tanks. Now, they were put a bit too close to the front line, and it turns out that being light tanks, their armor is not really good enough, and there were some horror stories of what happened to crews inside them. So it's interesting, there are claims that they are having excellent performances. I wonder how they're being used, whether they are just being used as glorified infantry fighting vehicles to move troops around, or whether those guns are actually being used at all. Anyway, going back to the other claims here. So, good innovation on the 54 Caesars that are being used, like Ukrainian adding innovation to them, but they want more SAMP-T, Crotale, and Mistral electronic warfare systems. Thierry was speaking to me, so a French chap that is a good supporter of the channel, was saying that it was interesting, and this is a really good point. So the other day, there was some really strong rhetoric from the Ukrainians with regard to the Patriot air defense systems and saying how good Patriot is. Zelensky was saying this is an absolute success, and it's also been really exciting for for those countries, and the Patriot manufacturers to get feedback. I mean, that's the implications of what he's saying, so that they can improve. And so he was basically advertising how good Patriot are. The downside to that, or at least the ramifications of that, would be that SAMP-T manufacturers are going to be thinking, hang on, stop shouting about how good Patriots are, because we are providing we are a competitor, but essentially, to Patriot. It's like Pepsi versus Coke or something. Stop shouting about how good Patriot are, because, what about SAMP-T? Well, the thing is, there aren't many SAMP-Ts in Ukraine, and this is an opportunity now for the SAMP-T manufacturers to say, right, we need to make sure that we are getting that equipment into Ukraine. So it's advertising SAMP-T as a competitor to Patriot, and that is a good bit of kit. So actually, there is healthy competition going on in the arms sector, and there will be different manufacturers that will be kind of annoyed that their competitors are doing well, and that advertising is being provided by Ukrainian governments, politicians, soldiers, and whatnot. So here's an opportunity for Santi to say, hang on, we're here too. But of course, they need to get Santi to Ukraine. So that's going to be a case of the manufacturers of Santi trying to persuade the governments that use Santi, so Italy, France, to actually stump up some more cash for those systems. Well, then we have Zelensky meeting Giorgia Meloni here with the 8th Italian military aid package for Ukraine soon to be finalised. In this thread, I wanted to go over what other aid Italy could provide to Ukraine in 2024. So one of the main armaments Ukraine needs more of is artillery ammunition. Last year, Thierry Breton visited the Semel Difesa, owned by Nexter, and OTO Melara industrial plants in Italy. It seems they are both involved in supplying munitions to Ukraine already. The 8th package could include munitions from both of those countries, such as 155mm Volcano, which we've already seen in Ukraine. So they are precision guided munitions like the Excalibur. We saw some things getting blown up the other day using a Volcano, supposedly. The next piece of equipment they could provide is the Iveco VTMM. Also, it has many different variants. So here we go. There you go, all these different variants, and is overall decently protected. Italy has many in service and could spare to donate some to Ukraine. They are at times also equipped with the Leonardo Hitrol RWS. Recent times, Italy seems to have retired their fleet of VBL Puma 4x4 vehicles, while seemingly keeping the 6x6 variant in service. Instead of being put in storage, collecting dust, this light vehicle can be sent to Ukraine and used for different roles, such as troop transports. And then there is the CIO Frekia, armed with 25mm cannon and standard IFV variant. The AT variant has access to Spike ATGM, so anti-tank variant. A mortar carrier variant is also in service, which could also be sent. Italy has many in service and an active production line. Although it seems most of the Russian fleet in the Black Sea has, for the most part, backed off from being near Ukrainian shores, Italy should also provide some anti-ship missiles to Ukraine in the form of the MBDA Marta ER. It's lightweight and has over 100 kilometers range. That would be good. There's always more that can be done. Hopefully the 8th aid package will include at least some of what is listed here. As always, I'll update you guys whenever more information comes out. Now, I would say the SAMP-T, as someone says here, in my opinion, Frekia probably no, especially the ATM role as Spike not being allowed. That's an Israeli ATGM allowed in the Ukraine theatre. Marta ER probably another no, as I think anti-ship Ukraine has it covered. Another SAMP-T is what Ukraine needs, though. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make. This guy says, this Italian weapons expert says, the Frekia doesn't need to be sent with Spike, so I don't see the point in ruling it out completely due to that. Italy has no more SAMP-Ts to spare, so I doubt another will ever be sent. In terms of the Volcano, sadly, I know very little, so it's hard to say. So the problem is, SAMP-T will want to be alongside Patriot as being lauded for its success in shooting down some of the best that Russia has in terms of ballistic missiles, so on and so forth. But if there aren't many of them around, it's a bit like Gripens, then there's less chance they're going to get to Ukraine, and if they're not going to get to Ukraine, then people can't shout about them, so you're not going to sell as many. So it really is up to the manufacturers in the countries to get SAMP-T there to work around the issue of low stocks. Estonia allocates an additional 15.2 million dollars annually in development aid for Ukraine. Estonia has allocated an additional 14 million euros annual development aid, and the Estonian media outlet ERR reported Estonia's Undersecretary for Development Aid has said. So that's good news. The Baltics are always very firm supporters of Ukraine, as I've said many times. Emmanuel Macron has urged French defense companies to increase production to support Ukraine. Again, we can talk about SAMP-T again. Again. Quote, "We cannot allow Russia to think it can win," French leader said. According to France 24, the French president warned that, quote, "a Russian victory would mean the end of European security." But again, we get to this issue of the defense manufacturers saying, yeah, sure, we're happy to increase production to support Ukraine, but in order to do that, we need the orders, and the orders come from you. So it seems to be a lot of rhetoric going on and not a lot of action. Same can be said about Taurus and about SAMP-T, and etc., etc. Okay, newly modernized and refitted Me-2MSB hoplite in Ukrainian service as a medevac platform. So it's really good news that helicopters are still being fitted up and sorted out for Ukraine. Obviously, they need as many helicopters, they need as many of everything as they can get. And the final thing is this. UK has successfully tested a Dragonfire laser weapon. Wowzers. Okay, this is like science fiction now becoming science fact. UK has successfully tested a Dragonfire laser weapon for the first time on aerial targets. According to the country's Ministry of Defence, the cost of such a system is £100 million. Its range is classified, but the Dragonfire weapon is highly accurate and reportedly capable of hitting any visible target. So a high-power laser weapon used against an aerial target for the first time in a trial. It can hit apparently a £1 coin from a kilometre away. So that's, that big from a kilometre. That's pretty good. It described the test at its Hebrides range in Scotland as a major step in bringing the technology into service. Wow. Be good to see that shooting down Russian drones and missiles. Anyway, Zelensky has been in interview with Matt Fry from Channel 4. I like Channel 4 News, actually. Volodymyr Zelensky called Trump's statement that he would end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours dangerous and invited him to Kyiv. He also said that he was not worried that American politicians tell Zelensky one thing, but behind his back they can do another. So that's politics. But this is a really interesting interview, and I advise you all go and watch all of it. It's just 15 minutes long, but it's well worth looking at for kind of reading between the lines and seeing some of the things he says that were like, oh, that's a little nugget. So I might pop back into this, but let's just hear what he has to say about the kind of aid from the US, etc.
One person I've interviewed some time ago who thinks he's a very tough guy and who always says he hates losers is Donald J. Trump, who could be the next American president. Now, we know that Donald Trump has said, when I'm president, this war is over in 24 hours. If you could say to him directly, what would you say to him in English about his proposition of ending this war?
I think I had possibility to give the message. I think maybe I don't know if his message will have such positive result as he said, because it
could be bluster.
Yeah, it can be just, political message.
Sure.
And that's it. And my attitude to this, the same. Because if it's political message, I don't afraid.
Yeah.
I understand election period, I understand difficulties, complicated period for the United States. And so if it's messages, okay.
Fine. It's politics.
It's politics, yes. But if it's some formula, I have to know it.
Sure. Have you spoken to him, by the way?
No, I didn't speak with him. But before the war, yes, I had a visit to United States.
Yeah.
We had dialogue with him and with his team. Yes. But we never spoke about it. This global with details.
Yeah.
But the period was another. But anyway, we've been occupied.
Would you invite him to Kyiv to come and visit?
With pleasure.
Yeah.
With pleasure.
Invite him now. Invite him on our program.
Yes, please. Donald Trump, I invite you to Ukraine, to Kyiv. So if you can stop the war during 24 hours, I think it will be enough to come to Kyiv.
All right.
In any day,
we'll make sure that he gets the message. Yeah, I'll make sure he comes.
That, who knows?
Yes.
For example, maybe Donald Trump really has some idea, a real idea, and he can share it with me, and I think it's okay, because it's. We can't have a secret with our people how to stop the war.
We'll find out.
Yeah. We'll see.
Apart from Donald Trump, there are many Republicans, again, also facing election in Washington, who are now saying, Ukrainian money, not so fast. And I know you spoke to them just a few weeks ago. You were in Washington.
Yeah.
You were very persuasive. And even after that, they said, stop for now. Does that worry you?
I'm worried only because our people and our budget, and we have a gap, financial gap because of the war. And I'm not worrying about with respect, about the congressmen or senators. I mean, that I had meeting with them. When I sit with them, in any case, bilaterally, we have dialogue tete-a-tete or in team, mostly, 99.9%, they are on my side.
Of course. Yeah.
It's, yes. And
To your face.
to my face,
Do you trust them? Do you think that they are, nice to your face and they say we support you, and then behind your back?
I trust results. Before this, we couldn't really survive without U.S. help, U.S. support. It's real fact. And that's why, of course, I trust, mostly I trust. And I count on them today. Yeah, it's true. I can't, even during, my 5 years, almost 5 years, my presidency, and during this war, I saw, from one side, I saw everything. But when I speak with politicians, sometimes I think that I saw nothing. Yes, because...
Give me an example.
Everybody's smiling, everybody's laughing, everybody's crying, hugging you, say that your resilience, you're so strong, you're the man, you're the leader of the free world, you save our democracy. If Ukrainian people didn't have such president, if such president didn't have such Ukrainian people, we could lose the half of Europe, and Russia will attack United States and NATO countries, and we have to give you everything.
And then?
Everything what we have. And then, cut.
Helmets.
And then, yes, not only helmets, they helped a lot, really.
Yes, they have,
helped a lot.
recently,
But
yes.
they helped a lot to stay.
Right.
And I think they could help us more to win.
And I'm going to leave it there. Just fascinating stuff. And so, see, I don't know why Matt Fry went with helmets there, but sort of moving on to kind of Germany there. But actually, the idea is that we were, without US aid, we'd be done. So it's the importance of US aid, but it's also this idea that I really am with him there, which is everyone was congratulating me. Everyone was going, applause and hugs, and you're doing an amazing job, and this is incredible. And without you, Europe would be screwed, and without and NATO countries might be attacked, and blah blah blah. And then suddenly, no more aid, thanks. And that's what he's saying now, and it's like that's frustrating. And also the idea that we were helped to stay. So the translation of that would be we were helped to stop Russia in their tracks, but not enough to win. And had we been helped enough to win, then we'd be in a very different position now. So I think that's a very revealing, very, very revealing interview. Really good stuff. Zelensky invites Trump to Ukraine, as is being reported here, that a lot of people are now picking up on to say. And as he said, look, if you can stop the war within 24 hours, and this is some secret formula that we don't know, well, we need to know there are people dying. Why are you keeping that secret? And if it's just bluster, then I understand that's electioneering, and I understand that's election campaigning. But I don't know that is part of his election campaigning. To be honest, well, it is. We did see it in the town hall and whatnot. But I do like Zelensky's point on that. Biden's cautioned Congress leaders that curtailing assistance for outgunned Ukrainian forces risks a spillover of hostilities into neighboring NATO countries, thereby obliging US troops to directly confront the Russians, as per CNN sources. This is something that we've known about since time immemorial. Is that since the beginning of this conflict, is that it's better to have the war taking place in somewhere like Ukraine as a sort of proxy war, because then it doesn't commit NATO troops, and you don't see American soldiers, in this case for Biden, American soldiers dying. But this should be like, if this should be what most Americans would want, in terms of, you've just seen decades and decades of the Cold War. You've seen the USSR as your mortal enemy, and your design and manufacturing of weaponry has been with regard to trying to fight the USSR and Russia, right? And you've got all this weaponry and infrastructure in place to do that. And now we're at this point where someone else is doing that for you, but you can supply them with all this weaponry and assistance, and you can do that fight against Russia without losing a single American soldier, and for less than 5% of your budget. And yet people are now balking at it. I mean, what's going on? European Union has started discussions on a new sanctions package that aims to approve by February the 24th, the 2-year mark for the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's interesting listening to Jeremy Hunt, who's the UK Chancellor, saying that every G7 meeting he goes to, other financial secretaries and ministers and whatnot, he says that this is like number one on the agenda. So the sanctions is always being discussed. It's not something that every so often, should we discuss? It's like every meeting is about how do we keep sanctions going on Russia. So I found that pretty interesting. The EU Parliament voted 345 to 104 for a resolution that condemns the deliberate, continuous and systematic efforts of the Hungarian government to undermine the founding values of the EU. Resolution also calls for stripping Hungary of its voting rights at the European Council after Viktor Orban blocked a 50 billion euro funding package for Ukraine last month. So this is again still rumbling on. It's interesting that it looks like Hungary will be held to account, which is something that I and many others have been calling for a long time. But it's difficult though, because you don't want to if you throw Hungary out of, say, NATO, then you're giving Hungary to Russia. So I know a lot of people say this. It's the same with Turkey. Turkey's in NATO for an incredibly important reason. They are the bridge from Europe to the Middle East, Europe to Asia. You could even argue Judeo-Christianity to Islam. There are lots of ways that Turkey is such an important geographical and ideological bridge. Now, and the Bosphorus Straits, they control that into the Black Sea. And if you say we're going to kick Turkey out of NATO and we're going to push Turkey away from the EU, and all you're doing is pushing them towards the sphere of influence of Russia and China. You would rather they are on your side as a difficult partner than not on your side. It's that simple. So many people will slag off Turkey and want them out. No. I would say that's an incredibly bad decision. Now, the same can be said for Hungary. You'd rather have a difficult partner inside, that is part of your geographical area, than someone that's been booted out and fully under Russia's sphere of influence and sitting inside Europe. So again, there is that issue. Italy sentences an ex-Navy officer to 20 years over spying for Russia. Frigate Captain Walter Biot was found guilty of espionage and bribery after being allegedly caught handing over secret data to Russian embassy official in March 2021. This sort of stuff still goes on. Ukraine ranks as the third largest agricultural supplier to the EU despite Russia's ongoing Black Sea blockade. This tells us a couple of things. One, the success of the Black Sea grain initiative, that corridor down the coastline, is huge. It's now up to pretty much pre-war levels, and that has been majorly assisted actually by the government in tandem with insurers. And so it's and British maritime insurance. I mean, Lloyd's of London is the major maritime insurer, and so they are going to have a huge impact on global shipping. And actually, if they can be persuaded or not manipulated is the wrong kind of word by the UK government, then the UK government can have an oversized effect on global shipping and things like the grain initiative in the Black Sea. And actually turns out that it was the UK insurers that were first on board with that, and now there are 4 in total. And this is all really good news. So there are ways, and it was interesting listening to Zelensky's interview, and the part I didn't play was where he said the UK help massively with intelligence, and this is something we don't talk about an awful lot, and this is where, like, France, I think, help an awful lot as well, and the US obviously. So we can talk all we like about the number of shells that are produced and the amount of stocks that the UK doesn't have in its cupboard to be able to give to Ukraine, but there are things that nations do that are massively important that don't get talked about a lot, and that is almost certainly, well, one of the main ones is intelligence. Right, and then going on to hopefully what we're doing for time. Oh, this has gone on too long. I'll do this in an extra a little bit later because I think this is really important. This is the economic prospects for Russia going forward, but it's been a long one now. So anyway, take care. Speak soon. Toodle pips.